In this video, I'm going to explain how to use others' words and ideas in your own writing. This is important because for the final essay in Immigrant Narratives, you need to do some kind of research. You need to find one or more outside sources that let you talk about your subject's history. Now, those outside sources could be interviews that you do with other people, or they could be news articles, or they could be an organization's official website. It's up to you. But either way, you're going to be using other people's ideas and probably words in your own paper. So you need to understand how to refer correctly to outside sources. So, first things first, when using other people's words and ideas, it's very important to give them credit, which is called attribution. Attribution is important for a few reasons. Attribution allows readers to understand and evaluate the source of the information. If you just use the information in your paper and the reader doesn't know where it came from, then they don't know whether they should trust it or why they should listen to this information, right? It's important for them to know that the author was a newspaper reporter or that the person you were interviewing created the organization that you're writing about or has worked there for a long time. So you need to give the reader some information about who the source is so that they can decide whether or not they're a good source of information and so that they can understand where the information is coming from. This is also considered particularly important in academic writing, writing done by students and by professors, researchers, and so on, because attribution allows readers to find the original sources themselves if they're interested. So if a professor is reading a paper about a new scientific process and that paper mentions some other scientist who is working on the same subject, then the person who's reading it might want to go explore that work themselves, the work that's referred to in the paper they're reading. So if the writer has given enough information about the author that they're quoting or referring to, then the person reading it can go and find that original work themselves. And that's important because, researchers, professors, students, they might want to learn a lot about a subject. They might not want to read just one paper. They need more information about the subject. So attribution makes that easier for them to do. And then lastly, attribution is very important because it's considered ethical in the United States. It's considered the right thing to do because if you don't attribute something, then you're considered to be stealing other people's work. And this kind of stealing other people's words and ideas is known as plagiarism. Plagiarism is a really serious offense in the United States, especially in the academic world, at colleges and universities. It's not usually considered that you're breaking a law, but there are very strong rules about giving credit to other people. So, for instance, if a student is discovered to have plagiarized something, to have used somebody else's work without giving them credit, then the student might get a 0 on the paper, might even be reported to the university and be suspended or given some other kind of disciplinary action. And it's not just students, even professors and researchers who are found guilty of plagiarism can lose their jobs. It can really hurt their reputations because it's considered a really big deal in the United States and in plenty of other countries as well. So, we want to make sure that you don't plagiarize. Now, there are lots and lots of rules about how to properly create citations, which are the written notes that explain what the source is and who created it. And in fact, there's not just one set of rules. The exact rules for creating these citations, these written notes, depend on which citation style you are using. For instance, there's the MLA citation style, APA style, Chicago style. There are lots of different systems or sets of rules. You can find these rules online, and there are also online citation tools that help in this process. Now, we're not going to spend a long time on this because this is not a research class. We're not going to spend a long time going over the rules, and I'm not going to be that strict about what format you use when you're making citations. However, you must give some kind of attribution for your outside sources, whether it's a news article, a website, or an interview you conducted. So, I'm going to give you some very simplified rules for creating citations just for this paper. When you are doing work for in other classes in the future, you should make sure that you understand the rules that your professor wants you to use in that class. But in this class, in this particular case, you can do it in a simple way, and that's fine with me. Within the sentence where you first use someone else's words or ideas, the first time that you mention an outside source that you're using, you are going to introduce the author or the person you're interviewing with their full name, if you know who the author is. You're going to include the name of the article or website, if there is a name for the article or website. And you're also going to make sure to put quotation marks around their exact words, if you use their exact words. So those are the three basic rules that I want you to follow when you first use someone else's words or ideas. And I'm going to give you some examples. And then if you mention the outside source again, or you use their words and ideas again, you can just use the author's last name, if there is an author, or you could just use the name of the website, if it's a website, so the reader knows which source you're referring to the next time you do it. So here's an example. We're going to imagine that there is a newspaper article called The Sunshine State by Justin Taylor, okay? So Justin Taylor would be the author, and the name of the news article is The Sunshine State. So here's an example of how you might use ideas or information from his article, even though you aren't using his exact words. According to Justin Taylor's article, The Sunshine State, Florida farms produce a lot of citrus and sugarcane. So in this case, you're not using his exact words that he wrote. You're just using his information. But you still need to say where it comes from. And so you use the name of the article, and you put that in quotation marks, and you capitalize the words in the article, in the name of the article, and you also use the name of the author, Justin Taylor. Okay, so you've got both of those in the sentence the first time that you use ideas or words from that source. Now let's say that you're going to use it again, okay? So you don't have to say all of that again. This time you can just refer to the author by his last name. In fact, Taylor says Florida's citrus production is only second to California's. Now this time you're using not just information, but you're using his exact words, the words that he wrote in the article. And so this time you're going to put quotation marks around his exact words. You don't put them around your words, you just put them around his words. And that makes it very clear to the reader what he wrote, what you are using of his. Now in this case, because you've already given the name of the article and the author's full name, you don't have to use all of that again. You can just say, this time, Taylor. Taylor says this. Or you could say, Taylor wrote, and you use quotation marks. And then it's also possible, in this case, you're using an entire sentence that he wrote. Okay, and you introduce it by putting a comma before the sentence begins, and then you give the whole sentence and you have a period afterwards because it shows the end of the sentence. But you could also use just a phrase instead of using a whole sentence. But you still need to give credit to the person who wrote the phrase originally, because it wasn't your idea. You didn't come up with it. Somebody else did. And so you can use a phrase that he wrote inside your own sentence so that it fits as if the whole thing was written by one person. It all makes sense together as one sentence, but you show which part of it came from a different source. So this makes the state a vitamin C powerhouse, in Taylor's words. So the whole thing sounds like one sentence, but actually this part is your words, and the part inside the quotation marks show the words that Taylor wrote. And you're also mentioning Taylor by name again so that your reader knows where the words came from. Okay? And this is what you're doing if you are using a newspaper article. You could do the same thing if you were interviewing someone, if you conducted the interview yourself. Except in that case, you don't have the title of a newspaper article, so you would just want to make it clear to your reader where the information came from. When I interviewed Leslie Reinhers, who has worked at JVS for many years, she said, you know, here at JVS, helping students is important, okay? So again, you put quotation marks around the words that come from somebody else, that somebody else said. And the first time that you mention this outside source, you give their full name, right? And in addition, I want you to give a little bit of information about, why are we even listening to this person? Why did you choose to interview them? You need to give that information too. So, this very briefly says who she is, or maybe, a teacher at JVS for many years. And still, because you're using a complete sentence of hers, you have a comma, and then you have her sentence inside quotation marks. And as you can see, there are a couple of different ways of introducing a sentence that was written by somebody else. You can say, according to this person or this article, and then you give what that says, or you can say, she said or she wrote, or you can put it at the end. You can say, here at JVS, helping students is important, according to Leslie Reinhers, a JVS teacher. All right? So that's basically all that you need to do for this paper to give credit to any outside sources that you are using, that you find through the research that you're doing. And I hope that's all clear enough and simple enough. And you can always ask me if you have any questions about it. I'm not going to be super strict about getting everything exactly right, but I just want to make sure that you are showing where you use someone else's words or ideas, and that you're introduced to the process of attribution.